Hi guys, Asmo here, and in this guide I will explain how to level a Summoner Necromancer in a very detailed and comprehensive way. This leveling strategy has been tested and carefully crafted with every gem and passive compared against their alternatives to give you the best leveling experience possible for this archetype at each stage of the campaign. If you're tired of being slow, of having low damage, or of having your minions die a lot during the campaign, this guide will solve all of those issues for you. This leveling strategy transitions directly into a generic Summoner Necromancer League starter build, also known as the Zoo Necromancer, but it's a great approach for leveling any minion-based Necromancer build that scales primarily minion damage. This guide comes also with a detailed PoB and a written version that lists all of the gem setups. There's one disclaimer I want to make first. While Summoner Necromancer is considered a very beginner-friendly build that can be leveled with relative ease, if you want to be very fast and you want to have an optimal playthrough, it can be very demanding in terms of gear manipulation because of very heavy socket pressure. And if, like me, you want to level Summoner Necromancer as fast as possible, then I recommend practicing it ahead of time. I also highly recommend using a loot filter prepared specifically for this build. Here are build-specific items to highlight that will save you a lot of time and currency while leveling. A 3-link blue in Act 1, a 3-link blue red in Act 1, a 2+ link, so 2 or 3-link green red shields in Act 1, which you will save for later, Goat's Horn in Act 1, Jade Amulet in Act 1 and 2, Heavy Belt in Act 1 and 2, 3-link green red shields, 3-link minion wands and shields, and 2+ link green red minion wands and shields. And if you're interested in using my personal loot filter that I use for this build, I share my loot filters with Patreon supporters, and you can find the link in the description of this video. Step 1, before making a witch, which will be our main character, I highly recommend making a Templar character and killing a Hillock with it. With the 324 League Necropolis, every zone will force you to fight harder monsters than usual. This will be especially impactful at the early stages of the campaign, such as the Mudflats Roas. Making a Templar grants you access to a full vendor reset for both vendors, extra scrolls of wisdom, and elemental proliferation gem from level 2. It is worth the 1.5 minutes that it takes. Use this Regex to highlight items in the vendor for quicker search by pressing Ctrl F and Ctrl V. This will highlight 4 links, movement speed boots, items with green red 3 links for your shield charge setup, items with blue 2 link, which will include the blue red and blue 3 links that you need, minion gear, as well as an uncommon +1 to all minion skill gems helmet modifier that becomes available from item level 14. For your initial witch setup, you're looking for 3-link blue or at minimum 2 linked blue sockets, and a 3-link blue red or at minimum linked blue and red sockets. Also movement speed, and optionally you can buy a coral ring, especially if it has a high implicit roll. A quick note about movement speed boots: it is generally more important to have the right gem sockets than the extra movement speed early on. At the beginning of Act 3, you can craft movement speed prefix on boots from your crafting bench for 3 augmentations, and until then only use movement speed boots if it doesn't stop you from having the right sockets and links, but of course, ideally you'd want both. Pick up the Rolling Magma from your quest and then link it with Elemental Proliferation and Arcane Surge, Elemental Proliferation being the priority here if you don't have the 3-link yet. After Mudflats and killing Hellrake, pick up Flame Wall, Frost Blink, Quicksilver, and Summon Phantasm as your quest rewards, and buy Holy Flame Totem. This will cost you 1 Wisdom Scroll. Equip them all and link Holy Flame Totem with Summon Phantasm. Pick up any coral, iron, or sapphire rings that you find on the ground. You can turn the iron ring into a sapphire ring by vendoring the iron ring plus a blue gem to a vendor, and you will have excess blue gems after the level 9 swap. You can also pick up a Rustic Sash because it will boost your Holy Flame Totem damage, and replace it for a Heavy Belt after level 18. Ideally, you want your gems to primarily occupy the non-weapon slots, because that will make it easier to equip any Goat's Horn that you will find, which should be your weapon of choice until level 18. If you find any 3-link items with the right colors, but you already have a good 3-link in that slot, it is often worth putting in the stash as a backup. Finding a 4-link or a good pair of boots can force you to replace your old 3-link, and having a couple of backup items for your main gem setups can save you in those situations for a few seconds worth of time investment. After killing the Dweller of the Deep and right before Brutus, pick up the Infernal Legion as your quest reward and buy Summon Raging Spirits, minion damage and added lightning. This will cost you 1 Wisdom Scroll and 2 transmutations. If you don't have the required currency, just buy your gems next time you're in town when you have the currency for it. You should hit level 9 right before Brutus and spec into the Enduring Bond. At this point, you will swap Rolling Magma for SRS because it will become stronger now due to your passives. Your setup should ideally look like this: SRS plus Infernal Legion plus minion damage, Holy Flame Totem plus Summon Phantasm plus added lightning, and then Frost Blink, Flame Wool and Arcane Surge, ideally linked together, but usually you won't have the extra third 3 link, so you don't need to do that. After killing Brutus, pick up the Flame Dash as your quest reward and use it instead of the Frost Blink. Also pick up Flesh Offering as your quest reward from Nessa and use it in the Merveil fight after one of the golden statues or the squids die. In Act 2, you wanna rush to the Retribution node first, since we can still benefit from the increased damage modifiers to our own damage before we fully swap to minions. And in this act, you will need 1 extra green and 1 extra blue socket. After the Chamber of Sins, pick up Desecrate as your quest reward and buy Summon Skitterbots. You can also buy Jade Amulet if you haven't found one yet. The higher implicit dex roll, the better. This will cost you 1 alteration and 1 transmutation. Link Skitterbots with Infernal Legion. They will act similarly to Righteous Fire. They will basically deal damage around them, but they cannot be damaged and thus they will never die. In this act, we're also killing all bandits. At level 18, you should pick up the Sacrifice Notable and Minions recover 5% life on Minion Death Mastery, which are required for the swap to Zombie Skeleton setup. And after killing Weaver, pick up the Minion Speed as your quest reward and level it in the offhand weapon. Go to Act 1 and pick up your passive skill quest and also buy Raise Zombie and Summon Skeletons, as well as melee physical damage from the Act 2 town. This will cost you 1 Scroll of Wisdom, 1 transmutation and 1 alteration. Your setup now should look like this: Raise Zombie plus Summon Phantasm plus added lightning, Summon Skeletons plus minion damage plus melee physical damage, Summon Skitterbots plus Infernal Legion, and Flame Dash, Desecrate and Flesh Offering. Do not use minion damage with zombie setup just yet, because the max life penalty will cause them to die. Also look for Bone Shields, which start spawning at level 15, and Calling Wand, which starts spawning at level 20, ideally with 3 linked sockets. If you find one with good sockets and a decent implicit roll, you should craft it with any random essence you find for a chance at additional minion modifiers such as minion life, minion attack speed or minion damage. Just be careful, because if you commit to the Bone Spirit Shield without at least a green-red 2 link, you will have to find another slot for your shield charge setup, which will be green-green-red, so keep that in mind. You should swap to the minion weapon and minion shield as soon as you can after the swap to the zombies and skeletons. In Act 3 at level 24, we want to buy the Pride Aura gem from Clarissa, which costs 1 alteration, and we want to remove Infernal Legion from the Skitterbot setup because it is not worth using anymore and you need the extra mana reservation to use Pride. If you find that the mana cost is too high, you can temporarily disable Skitterbots until you pick up the Life Mastery for skills cost life instead of 30% of mana cost, which is designed to be acquired at the time of your swap to shield charge at around level 28-29. However, with the right usage of Mana Flask, you should be perfectly fine. Summoning skeletons doesn't cost too much mana, and the most draining skill is the Desecrate plus Flesh Offering combo. And at this stage, I make sure to press my Mana Flask whenever I Desecrate, which is the perfect time to do it and automatically deals with any mana issues. If you don't care about optimizing speed, you can also use the Purity of Elements instead of Pride, at least until you do your lab and ascend. This will make you tankier and safer. You should also check vendor for 4 links anytime you're in town from now on. Your ideal 4 link colors are all blue or all blue with 1 red socket. I recommend fully clearing the docks zone for optimal XP curve with this build in order to time your levels with the access to the extra gems in the library. As soon as you get to the Ebony Barracks, you should pick up the waypoint and head up to the right to the Imperial Gardens, grab the waypoint there as well and do the library. Just make sure to cap your cold rest before entering this zone, or you will risk getting frozen to death or at the very least getting significantly slowed down. From the library, you should pick up Feeding Frenzy as your reward and buy Shield Charge, Vulnerability, Momentum, Faster Attacks and Raise Spectre, and from Act 2 Town you should also purchase Minion Life. This will cost you 1 Wisdom Scroll, 2 Transmutations, 1 Alteration and 1 Chance Orb. If you don't have the Chance Orb, you can also kill Gravicious for a free Raise Spectre gem from the quest reward. After purchasing the minion life gem in Act 2 town, go to the old fields right next to it and cast Desecrate until you get the Carnage Chieftain Corpse. Raise 2 of them as specters and they will provide you and your minions with frenzy charges. Your setup now should look like this: shield charge plus faster attacks and momentum if possible, raise specter plus minion life, summon scarebots, pride, vulnerability, flame dash, flesh offering, desecrate, and 2 3 links or 4 links. For your 4 links, you want raise zombie, summon phantasm, minion damage, and minion speed. Since we're using pride and vulnerability now, we will favor support gems that scale physical damage of our minions. I recommend swapping added lightning for minion damage around the time you do lab and ascend. Depending on the 4 link colors you can get, you also have options of using other support gems that will increase your damage even if they're not the ideal choice. You can use added lightning damage, added cold damage, or added fire damage, which becomes available from the library. Just remember that phantasms are spellcasters that use projectiles, so gems like melee physical damage or multi-strike are not good in this setup because they do not benefit your phantasms. For summon skeletons, you want skeletons, minion damage, melee physical damage, and feeding frenzy. The feeding frenzy gem will make your skeletons aggressive and it will allow them to also use the dash ability to move around and help with their DPS uptime and clear speed. And just like with zombie phantasm setup, you can use other support gems if you don't have the socket colors for the perfect setup. Alternative support options include things like minion speed, added fire damage, added cold damage, and ruthless, which also is available from the library. Around level 30, I recommend picking up a couple of life passives such as Discipline and Training or Heart and Soul, and doing your lab before Dominus. You want to ascend as a Necromancer and pick the Commander of Darkness first. The extra resistances will help you as well as your zombies and skeletons, making sure that they will not die. I've leveled with this setup multiple times and not a single time I've lost a Spectre. I've lost zombies a few times fighting Dominus and fighting Piety, especially the one in the belly of the beast with the big ass laser, but only usually you would lose a couple of zombies and resummon them, which is not a big problem. Just remember that summoning skeletons during AoE heavy fights will heal your other minions thanks to the minion defense mastery that we picked. In Act 4, you want to pick up Carrion Golem as soon as you can from your reward after the Dried Leg, and at level 34 you want to link it with the minion life support together with Raise Spectre, and this will make sure that it never dies during the campaign and you don't have to resummon it either. And around level 40, you will get another max zombie, so make sure to resummon it. In Act 6, you can buy the Brutality support from Lily and use it for your zombie/phantasm setup instead of the minion speed if you want to maximize your DPS. And you can also purchase gems that you wish to start leveling for later, such as Hypothermia, Determination, Unbound Ailments, Poacher's Mark, Haste, and Divine Blessing. And from this point, your setup remains pretty much the same until the end of the campaign. From your second lab, you should select the Mindless Aggression passive, followed by the Bone Barrier from the third lab. Around level 56-57, you'll get another Max Spectre, and you can get either another Carnage Chieftain or a Host Chieftain, which gives you power charges and your minions power charges. This comes from the Ashen Fields in Act 7. And then you just want to continue working on your gear and resistances and progress to maps. And now let's go over the PoB, starting with the passive skill tree progression. So the PoB is very detailed. It includes the starter version of the build with the passive skill tree, skills, as well as items and notes which have the written version of this guide. This is a very massive write-up that I did in here. And the tree is something that I think I should explain because there are very specific breakpoints and very specific reasons as to why we do it in this exact order. That's why there is so many different leveling trees here. So first, we're starting by pathing straight to the Enduring Bond. This would be level 9 when you're fighting Brutus. Then we're gonna pick up Lord of the Dead as well as the Minion Offense Mastery. This is the point where we are fighting Merveil. This is around level 12. This is also very, very important. If you don't pick up the Minion Mastery early on for the accuracy, your minions are not gonna be getting 100% chance to hit, and you're going to be lowering your damage for no reason. This is something that I've seen a lot of people skip early, but it is very important. Next, we're pathing straight to the Retribution because we still benefit from the increased damage, which is a generic modifier that applies to your damage from your Holy Flame Totem and Flame Wall. So we're still benefiting from that, as well as scaling our minions. And then we're pathing toward the Sacrifice and the Minion Defense Mastery. This is the exact level where we are swapping to skeletons and zombies, which is level 18. Pathing to something like Death Attunement early early on will make it so that your zombies actually are going to be dying early on, so you don't want to do that. Then we're picking up a spiritual command as well, which will be really good for attack speed for our minions. It's a 2-point notable, which you should pick, but also it's going to later speed up our shield charge, which is why this build can get really fast. Next, we are pathing straight to Death Attunement. Before picking up this should be somewhere where you're fighting Val Oversoul in Act 2, and then this is the beginning of Act 3, and in Act 3 we're also picking up the Purity of Flesh and Life Mastery with the skills cost life instead of 30% of mana cost. Then you have an option. You can either pick up a couple of extra life nodes if you are scared of the lab, or you can go straight for the attack speed and cast speed as well as minion damage, because this will speed up your shield charge, since after this point you will have shield charge already available. From our lab, as I mentioned before, we are picking the Commander of Darkness, again attack speed, cast speed, which benefits you as well as the increased damage and the elemental resistances. Elemental resistances being basically the most important part. This helps you with gearing, allows you to get more life on your gear instead of extra resistances if you already are capped, and also allows your minions to be much more tanky, especially the specters and zombies, because these resistances will be really handy on fights like Dominus, for example. Okay, next, number 4, we are basically picking up the minion offense mastery as well as pathing toward the accuracy here. We got a couple of extra life nodes here, and this is the point at which we are fighting Kitava. This should be level 43. You will get this at level 43 and you will be doing huge amounts of damage. This is where the build picks up. This is necessary for accuracy. If you're going to path somewhere else, you're going to miss a lot of damage by missing it. Next, we are picking up some life, so you can pick up the Cruel Preparation as well as a Life Mastery for the extra flat 50 life, and you can also pick up the remaining minion damage and minion life as well. After that, we have a few other notables, few other nodes that we get life from, so we can get life from here, we can get life from here. We are filling in these last minion nodes, and then this is where we are entering campaign. We are going to entering maps, sorry. We're going to pick up a couple of points here together with these nodes. We care about increased energy shield as well later on, because we're going to be pathing toward Eldritch Battery. But as soon as you connect these nodes here, you can respec these 2 points. This is a little bit more efficient to go through. And then also we are picking up block nodes together with resistances. This is really nice for entering maps because it allows you to much easier gear up. And we're also picking up reduced mana cost and life nodes, which are right here. Shortly after that, the next thing I would pick would be probably these nodes, Mystic Bulwark, as well as Mana Reservation Efficiency and Mana Reservation Efficiency in here. This is what I would do shortly after entering maps. And after that, we are going to be pathing toward Eldritch Battery, other aura nodes, and a Ravenous Horde. You'll notice that there is a cluster jewel here. This is one of the first main upgrades that I would definitely recommend you make. Blessed Rebirth makes it so that minions created recently cannot be damaged. This applies to your phantasms and skeletons especially, which makes it so that during crazy boss fights, if you're fighting something that will be difficult to take down otherwise, your skeletons will help a lot. You can see that the build here in the League Starter version has 5.8 million DPS. This is with relatively cheap gear with level 20 gems, except for Spectres. I put Spectre here level 21 to show you that it's actually important to have level 21 because it gives you an additional Spectre with the exact gear that we have because of the levels. So if you have +4 levels, altogether the level 21 Spectre will give you 3 Spectres as opposed to 2. So together with the Death Attunement, we're getting 4 Spectres instead of 3, which gives you more consistent charges. So now we went over the passive skill tree. Let's go over the skills. You will have setups here. This is everything mentioned also in the written version of the guide, and this gives you options. The selected supports are the ones that you should prioritize, and the other ones are the alternatives that you can use if you don't have the right socket colors. So that gives you some options. Then we have another setup here, and then eventually you get to maps, which is the end game setup, in which we have a race zombie, which will be in the 6th link together with the phantasm. We have summon skeletons, which will be also with Val skeletons. Val skeletons provides huge amount of damage. If you see 5.8 million, if I click on Val skeletons, it goes to 8 million. So Val skeletons is a huge amount of DPS, and you will have it on every boss fight, on every map boss, everything like that. You will always have this available. It's pretty quick to stack up. Then we have Scarebots, Pride, and Determination. So those will be the auras you'd be using together with Unbound Ailments. And we don't need Enlighten. Since this is a league starter, I try to keep the budget very low. And we are able to reserve all of that because we are using Energy Shield as our Mana Eldritch battery. Race Spectre simply has Carrion Golem and Minion Life together with it so that it doesn't die. We also have Flame Dash in here so that we can utilize the links properly. Here we have a Bone Offering, Poacher's Mark, and Convocation. So there are two main auras you can do with physical, two main curses you can do with physical damage. You can either use Poacher's Mark or we can use Vulnerability, but Vulnerability we can actually get from our Animate Guardian, which I'm going to explain in a moment. So Bone Offering, this is something you want to get after you do your Uber Lab, which will give you the Mistress of Sacrifice. And after that, you also want to scale things like effect of your offerings. You can see, like, for example, this node gives me here 7% spell block, 7% spell block chance, block and spell block. So there's a huge amount of defense that we get from effects of offerings, which happens also to be on our gear. Finishing up, we got Haste with Divine Blessing, which we can support the casting of. If I do Haste, Divine, okay, Haste, it should cost mana cost 432 and we have 570 energy shield. So you need to make sure that you have enough energy shield on your gear to support that, which with armor and energy shield bases and maybe like one roll of ES on something will be completely fine. Then what else we have here? We've got Animate Guardian. So for Animate Guardian, I highly recommend using something like the Hungry Loop, and I wouldn't really set up Animate Guardian before that because it would be very, very annoying if it dies. So I would just wait for the Hungry Loop. You want to level the support gems that are required first to level 19 and almost to 20, and then when they are hitting level 20, instead of clicking them, you're putting them in the ring and leveling in the ring. So you want Minion Life, Elemental Army. This will give you resistances. This will give you max res as well for your guy. Meat Shield, which will make him take less damage, and Feeding Frenzy, which will enable to basically enable you to get the buff without having to waste the socket in any other setups. This here is just for the phantasm damage calculation, because otherwise it only calculates either the zombies or the phantasms here, so this has to be put in here. Now let's look at the items. The items, I try to make it so that there is usually an essence modifier, 2 good mods, and a crafted mod, and that's it. There's no really anything better than that, and very cheap uniques such as the Jinxed Juju and the Hungry Loop and Careful Planning. So for the weapon, ideally you want minion damage. You can use an essence to force that. Ideally you want +1 to minion skill gems or +1 to all gems. Either one works perfectly fine. And then some other damage modifiers would be great. If you can get crit or attack speed or cast speed is fine. And then you want to craft a trigger so that you don't have to cast the skills in your weapon, right? So you can use Bone Offering automatically, Poacher's Mark automatically, and Convocation automatically. Convocation could also be on a suffix on a weapon if you happen to roll that. Convocation is useful, but it's not very necessary. Like during leveling, for example, you don't really need it, but it's useful if you want to do boss fights, if you want to like reposition your minions to hit a very specific target. So it's nice to have. Then for the shield, you also would like to have +1 and something like Minion Life, for example. You can get that with an essence as well, and you can get some life or you can get some resistances. And then also you want to craft a chance to avoid elemental ailments, which we're gonna stack to get 100% chance to avoid elemental ailments. And then for the helmet, I recommend crafting on a helmet that is not an intelligence base. So for example, armor or evasion base or armor evasion base, so that you have a higher chance of getting the level of all minion skill gems, because on intelligence base it's going to be a little bit more difficult to get with different crafting methods, especially if you're doing fossils in order to craft this. So you can use something like you can use fossils in order to block and craft this. You can also use essences to craft this, or you can just buy it from trade with whatever modifiers it has on it, but ideally you want an empty prefix. So the best modifiers you can get would be like +2 to level of minion skill gems and some life and empty prefix, and that would be amazing. That would allow you to either finish it or just slap the prefix and have it as it is. The prefix that you want to craft is +1 to maximum level or to maximum number, of raised zombies and number of skeletons. And also implicits are pretty important on these items. So these are the Eldritch implicits. I put the optimal ones, but there are some other different options. The optimal one for the helmet would be minions have increased maximum life and physical damage from hits taken as fire damage, for example. This will make you more tanky against fizz hits and also will make your minions more tanky. And remember that minion life is a very, very powerful stat now, because with the new passive skill tree, we're getting minions get 40% of their maximum life as extra maximum energy shield, which is really, really strong. So that's what you want on the helmet. Then on the chest piece, ideally, you want something like life res and physical damage reduction. You could also have something like you could go for like spell suppression bases, but I try to rely mostly on spell block from our bone offering and from our tree. But you could go for something like spell block for spell suppression as well. However, I went here with just the consistent setup of like armor, energy shield, life res, physical damage reduction whenever you can, and also we have the Gravicious Craft, which is physical damage from hits taken as fire and lightning damage. This is also very, very good for mitigating physical damage. On the implicits from the Searing Exarch and Eater of Worlds, you can get something like Pride has increased aura effect. That's probably going to give you the most damage, and then also increased effect of offerings for a block and spell block. On the gloves, you want to craft them with an essence. There is an essence that allows you to get minion damage, and you want basically life and resistances, maybe some armor, energy shield. And if you have crafted slots for like crafted resistances, prioritize crafting like elemental plus chaos. This will allow you to get you a little bit of extra chaos res, because it's going to be otherwise much more difficult to fit in. This is like one of the easiest ways of getting early chaos res. This craft comes from betrayal, so that's how you get that. And then on the implicits, you can get increased offering of your marks. This is one of the highest damage modifiers you can get. And then also minions deal increased damage. For boots, you want to craft them with chance to avoid elemental ailments. The essence usually is very expensive when it comes to like deafening essence, but with our setup, we don't need a deafening essence. You can get a shitty tier of the essence. I think you only need like 15 or 10%. I think 15% is the minimum that you need to get on the boots. So you just craft with these cheap essences. You can get, for example, boots with fractured movement speed, and you spam these essences until you get some good prefixes, craft life, and then you just put implicits on with the Exarch and Eater modifiers. You can get chance to avoid elemental ailments from the Eater, which will help you cap the chance to 100%. And then Bone Offering has 10% increase effect for more block and spell block. So this gives me 3% chance. Then we have Jinxed Juju. So this amulet is really nice. It works for multiple different summoner builds. The good thing about it is that it gives you strength and dex, which is what you need. It gives you chaos res, which is what you need. It gives you increased effect of auras, which is also amazing. And then it also makes it so that you 10% of the damage from hits is taken from your specters instead of you. So that's basically like half of a fortify effect. This is very, very useful, and if you get one with a decent roll, then you can invest in Anoint. The Anoint that I have here is Crystal Skin. So this one is slightly expensive because it requires a silver oil, so it should be maybe like 20 chaos or something like that, but it is worth spending a little bit of extra currency on this, because again, we're getting the chance to avoid elemental ailments and +1 to max resistances. Both of those being very, very useful. It will make you a much more tanky, and it will help you level, which will give you a lot more power, right? Passives are power, so you definitely want to make sure that you're tanky enough to keep leveling your character. And then we also are using a bone ring. This is just an example. You could use another ring, but we don't need that much more in terms of the attributes, in terms of the stats. There could be a bunch of more like more resistances and more chaos res whenever you can get, but I try to keep it to like minimum amount of modifiers that you want. So you want some life and res, crafted dexterity to get our dexterity requirements so that we can use things like haste and stuff like that. And then also minions deal increased damage, because this is a bone ring. You can get a bunch of different minion modifiers on this as well. The other ring, we're going to be using Hungry Loop. Before you get that, you just use life and res. You can also use some bone ring with minion stats. For a belt, before you get a good roll, darkness and throned, you can just use a Stygian Vice with strength, life, and some resistances. Also for the abyssal sockets, these are the optimal modifiers that you would like. This is going to be probably a more expensive jewel. You're probably not going to get everything out of that, but the priority would be things like minions have accuracy if you don't have enough accuracy, and also minions deal increased damage if you've used a minion skill recently. These are typically the most powerful modifiers, and then ideally Flat Fizz and Life. So those are the 4 ideal modifiers. How to check if your minions don't have enough accuracy? So you go to the Calc tab, you pick, for example, Raise Zombie, you click on Show Minion Stats, and then you see there's going to be somewhere Attack, then we have other effects, Attack, more cast speed. Okay, we have the Summon Phantasm here selected, so we need to select the Raised Zombie, then we do Default Attack, and there we go. We have main hand, chance to hit, accuracy 100%. Then we can also look at our skeletons, so Val Summon Skeleton, Default Attack, 100% accuracy chance. This is what you want to see. If it's below, you need to get more accuracy, simple as that. For the flask, I recommend getting Granite and Jade, increased armor and increased evasion, Quicksilver and Silver Flask, reduced effect of curses and movement speed. This is just like a classic setup for any like starter build. This is what I generally get. This will give you a lot of defense during mapping and a lot of speed during mapping, and that's all you want from Flask. This is like the most powerful stuff you can get on Flasks, plus also bleed removal. And then we have the cluster jewels. So for the jewels, there's a couple of things I would use here. One is the careful planning, which gives you a huge amount of dexterity. This gives you 90 dexterity in this spot because it transforms intelligence into dex. And then also, as I mentioned before, Blessed Rebirth. This can come together with either nothing or with Feasting Fiends, or with the notable that gives you 5% chance to deal double damage for your minions if they are at full health. And that's going to be a much more powerful notable now because we have this energy shield on all of our minions, so they will be full health a lot of the time. And then also I recommend getting something like Enduring Composure if you don't have any other souls of Enduring Charges, because it will make you simply much more tanky. And I think I went through all of that. You will find everything else in the notes. It's basically a full written version of this. And the last thing I would like to talk about is while streaming and practicing and testing this build, I've been getting a lot of the same questions. So I decided to also include a short FAQ section at the end of this guide so that I can answer them. So first question I was getting, why not just level with Absolution? So I've tested Absolution, but since the removal of the early caster weapon crafts, it is much slower than this setup. Also, why not just level with Rolling Magma and Armageddon Brand? This is supposed to be a summoner leveling guide, which assumes that the player wants to play with minions without spending a lot of regrets and changing their gem and gear setups completely. It is also pretty competitive with Arma Brand leveling in terms of the speed due to the spiritual command and attack speed scaling and using shield charge. And why I'm not using minion instability. So minion instability forces you to have a bad pathing at the start of the tree, which results in much less overall damage. Why not level with Bama? This is a League starter leveling guide intended for a quick and fresh start, and as such, farming or buying transfigured gems is not a part of it, and also it's faster than Bama because of shield charge. Again, shield charge is just very, very powerful. Why are you using Holy Flame Totem with SRS? Holy Flame Totem has a very, very high hit rate, which makes it the best skill for spawning phantasms while hitting rare and unique monsters, and there is simply no better damage setup that you can use at that time while building a passive skill tree that will support minions. How do you know this is the best leveling setup? So I've measured different campaign boss skills using stopwatch and timing them, trying different setups at the same levels to get the most objective measurement that I could. And I took the character through the entire campaign multiple times while exporting it to PoB at the various stages and checking the damage numbers given by all of the available support gems. That's basically how I did it. Hopefully this answers the most common questions, but if you have any other questions about this leveling setup, write them in the comments and make sure to subscribe to the channel as well. Thank you so much for watching and see you next time.